Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. Our next guest is an expert in forensic macroeconomics. The last time he was on, and he's always requested to be on, I just want to read what he said the last time he was on. The tide is going out. We're going to find out who's wearing bathing suits pretty darn soon. I thought that was going to be the Brexit vote. All of a sudden, everything started tanking. The big question is not whether they can keep making things appear pseudo-normal for the next few days, weeks, or months. The outcome is absolutely cemented in stone. And I got to tell you, yesterday's headlines, you're talking about problems with the wholesale numbers. Jobs are tumbling. The jobless rate is completely phony. We have record number of people on food stamps, record number of people no longer in the workforce. That's the labor participation rate. Let's go ahead and bring on the guy who's going to make sense of the record high Dow and the record high S&P. I'm talking about Rob Kirby from Kirby Analytics. Rob Kirby, what's going on in the face of dreadful news? Real news on the street, and yet we have record high numbers in the Dow and the S&P 500 just yesterday. What's going on, Rob Kirby?
Well, Greg, actually, we don't just have record high numbers in the Dow and the S&P. We had a non-farm payroll report regarding U.S. jobs on Friday, and I mean, things really probably have never looked better from the standpoint of officialdom, and yet 2 or 3 days later, come Monday, the world looks much different than the big happy face that the Bureau of Labor Statistics tried to paint on the jobs picture on Friday. But this is the real world that we live in, because most of us know that our neighbors and our friends and people we know in our families, are having a tough time making ends meet. So there's a huge contradiction between what we hear from officialdom and what we are all experiencing on the street. That should be pointed out first and foremost. As to the record highs in the equity markets, everybody should be aware, or I'm sure they've heard, that there's a thing called the Plunge Protection Team, or the Working Group on Financial Markets, and we know that the hand of government is involved in tweaking or propping up equity markets around the world. The Bank of Japan, they actually gloat about their direct interventions in the equity markets. We know that Mr. Draghi at the European Central Bank is got a heavy hand involved in buying the debt of imperiled countries all over Europe. They're buying commercial. At least my understanding is they're also buying commercial paper. And we know that the Fed, in recent years has aggressively bought not only U.S. government debt, but they've also been heavily involved in purchasing mortgage-backed securities. So the onslaught of freshly produced new money does wonders with paper assets. But what the onslaught of all this fresh new paper doesn't do is create new physical precious metal, because new physical precious metal doesn't come from the end of a Gutenberg press or cannot be printed into existence with keystrokes. It has to be mined from the Earth's crust, and that creates problems for the let's just say officialdom, because demand for physical precious metal has been spiraling up, and as the demand for physical precious metal has been spiraling up, the officialdom, or let's just say the central banking community, spearheaded by the U.S. Treasury and the Exchange Stabilization Fund, have been throwing unprecedented amounts of paper promises of metal at markets to stem the rise, which should have been in free markets much bigger than the recent rise we've seen in both gold and silver.
So you're saying that what's going on here is that because most people would look at this and go, "Wow, gold and silver are finally breaking out. Silver's above 20. Gold, hit 1360 or 70, and of course it got whacked yesterday." But you're saying that it would have gone up way orders of magnitude higher already if they weren't trying to stick a thumb on the scale and hold it down. So you're saying that what we got was a fraction of what we should have got.
Yeah, I mean, for now, yes. but that does not diminish or alter the outcome that will ultimately happen. And the outcome that will ultimately happen is that the price of gold and silver will trade. Both of them will trade at many multiples of what they currently are, because at some point the paper markets will be so discredited that effectively the metals markets will turn into a cash and carry type market. And I mean, this is coming. And as the amount of paper promises continues to spool up, the whole, let's just say, macro confidence in the price discovery systems that we've been presented with, whether it be the LBMA or whether it be the COMEX exchange in New York, these things will be shown, because they will show themselves both to be completely and utterly the frauds that they are, because the amount of paper that they will continue to sell will ultimately discredit them. It's like a young child telling whopper lies in the schoolyard, and he can get away with it for a little while, but soon people recognize him to be a liar, and these exchanges will ultimately be their own undoing. Because
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean the amount of paper that they continue to sell, people will start, and people already are starting to ask questions about the veracity of the price discovery mechanism itself. So this is occurring. It continues to occur, and the only answer these people have for an increase in demand of physical product is to keep selling more paper. And at some point this will implode. This will unravel all by itself. It's happening now.
I know central banks have gold, but they don't have a lot of silver. Explain the dynamic with the central banks not having silver, and then do they not care about silver? Do they care more about gold? What is silver's role in all this? If you would please explain it for us.
Well, Greg, silver has been a monetary metal really probably longer than gold. Silver has a rich monetary history, and silver also is an industrial metal, and silver tends to be consumed, on an historic basis, because silver has so many adaptations in industry. The amount of silver that in above ground stockpiles is actually less than the amount of gold in above ground stockpiles, because silver is consumed. And as sovereigns, countries around the world historically have kept gold as part of their official reserves, and this continues to this day. But central banks and sovereigns around the world have never held big amounts of silver in their reserves, largely owing to the fact that it's consumed, an industrial demand. I mean, silver used to be actually a part of our money. Like silver, we used to have silver content in America and in Canada. We used to have silver content in our silver dollars, half dollars, quarters, dimes, and they took the silver out of money in the mid '60s. Because the industrial demand was making it go up in value. The demand for monetary use was driving the cost of making the money up, and so they took it out. And they took it out because they didn't want to drive the price of silver up, and and as a result, the little stockpiles that sovereigns had formerly to put into coins and currency that people have in their pockets, excuse me, they took the silver out of the money so that they could leave silver to the industrial realm, but silver is still considered by most people around the world as money, and it has historic links to gold, and it also consider that for every ounce of gold that comes out of the Earth's crust, roughly 9 ounces of silver are mined out of the Earth's crust. and that ratio of roughly 9-to-1 would imply that the price of silver should be possibly 1/9 of a price of gold. And I mean, 1/9 the price of gold today would put a fair market value on 1 ounce of silver at about what, $120 or $130, and it's not. Instead, it's 20. So something in nature is wrong, but nature's never wrong, and it's not nice to fool Mother Nature. And you could make a very strong argument that silver right now today should be many multiples of what it is.
You said in the pre-interview, and I want you to explain this term. You said to me, silver is kryptonite to the central banks. Why do you say that? Explain that.
Well, because they don't have any. They don't have physical stores of silver to feed into the market to beat its price down. So lately, in the last few days, what we've seen to stem the rise of silver, they've really been attacking the price of gold, because the whole notion there is, if we beat the price of gold down, silver will decline in sympathy with our attack on gold, because the two of them tend to trade in lockstep. And but we've actually really started to see almost a breakdown in that relationship recently.
Because I've noticed that. I noticed that sometimes you see, silver would be up 50 cents and gold be up $1, or gold be down $2. Gold yesterday was down, $20, and silver's down 4 cents. It's bizarre. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, people start to notice things like that, and that makes the whole price suppression game a much stickier wicket for for officialdom to continue with. Because it's sort of like pointing yourself out. It's like turning on a neon sign that something's wrong, that something doesn't make sense. And smart money. It's like putting blood in a shark tank, and all it does is it whips up and it excites the sharks. And when they smell the blood in the water, or when they sense the blood in the water. And you see, the other thing that's also occurred this year, Greg, is China's become a well-documented hoarder of physical silver. And they are not interested in buying paper promises. They want to hoard and stockpile real silver, physical silver. And they've been doing that, this year. And that's basically been a new player in the game. And that's why we're seeing the amount of paper promises of silver have gone up, as expressed by open interest, dramatically relative to gold so far this year. And that's
go ahead.
Anyway, that's just indicative of what's going on in China.
Good. I wanted to bring up China. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm so excited to have you on. I'm sure everybody else is loving this. China just lost in The Hague. They lost a chunk of the South China Sea to the Philippines. They're not going to give that up. They've built military bases in these areas, and now that sets up, is the U.S. going to defend our ally, the Philippines? What's going to happen with that? Is that going to expedite China doing something to punish America and punish markets? They have some power over there, over our markets. They got their own gold exchange now. What's going to happen with that? What do you think the possible fallout, at least financially, if not militarily, is going to happen with this loss to China in the South China Sea?
Well, it's really just another case of rising geopolitical tensions. In recent weeks, Vladimir Putin has been making very, very strong statements regarding the actions of the West and NATO. Making very provocative actions, and actually issued a very, very terse warning to the West last week that we're headed for a nuclear conflict if the West's aggressive posture continues. So I mean, to say that there's geopolitical tension between between China and the West regarding overtures China's making in the South China Sea, it's really, it fits the mold completely. It's, we have been provoking, the West has been provoking Russia and China in a lot of ways. I mean, the whole situation between Russia and the Ukraine has been misrepresented by the Western press or underreported. Much of the Ukraine situation was fomented and funded by none other than George Soros. He gloats about his role in taking down an elected government in Ukraine and installing a neo-Nazi regime in the Ukraine. That's a fact. That happened. It hasn't been reported accurately by the Western press because the Western press is nothing but a lapdog for the administration. And the reporting and the actions that are going on in the South China Sea, there have been aggressive moves on not just China's part, but there have also been aggressive moves on the part of the West as well. So it shouldn't surprise anyone.
The question: why do we want nuclear conflict? Do we want war? Is that what your reading is as a macroeconomic expert? Are we wanting war to cover up what's really going to ultimately happen in the economy, which is a complete collapse?
Typically, when money fails, the elites take us to war. That is a constant in history, and anybody who's aware of history know that as economies fail, typically leadership takes the country to war. So, are we on a war footing? Absolutely. Are we going to have nuclear war? I don't know. I hope and pray we don't. But we are dealing with leadership that is not representative of the people who have elected them, and these people, for the most part, are sociopaths at the top of the heap. And what is a sociopath going to do next? Good question.
Nobody knows. That's the scary thing. We just had the Hillary Clinton thing. Loretta Lynch in Congress defending the fact that she's not going to do her job, that she's derelict in her duties. I mean,
sure. And the head of the FBI, when he came out and made his public pronouncement, I mean, it sounded like he was going to indict Hillary Clinton because he listed a laundry list of things that she had done that were illegal and were crimes. And then he capped off his litany of transgressions that Hillary Clinton had made that would have put anyone else in the world behind bars, and said, "Oh, but there isn't enough evidence to indict her, and no rational person would indict her." I mean, it's really hard to stomach.
It's preposterous. It's in your face. We're not going to do our job. She's above the law. It's in your face. That's why there's no legal argument. You can't get into a debate at Georgetown or Harvard.
And that speaks directly to the comment I just made about people at the top are sociopaths. The rules don't apply to them.
Wait, well, let me interrupt you here, and I got to get to this before we get done with this interview. You have multi-national contacts around the globe. They're worth hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. They got lots of money. What are your contacts saying about this whole Brexit thing? The market dies, the market comes back up. What are they saying? Are they undeterred by any of the BS going on?
Broadly, they just refer to the most current events as the death throes of the dollar-centric system. Very bluntly and simply.
They're not buying the record highs. They're not buying the new high on the Dow. Woo, yay! They're not buying the new high on the S&P. They're not there. It doesn't make any difference to them. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, Greg. They don't do equities. Their interest is in real stuff. They buy real things. I mean, they'll buy metal because it's real and tangible, but they're only interested in the physical. They'll buy mines. They'll buy strategically important companies in the agribusiness. They'll buy infrastructure. But the one thing that's constant is there's always a tangible element to anything that they're really interested in acquiring. And what they do is they basically they don't want to own dollars. They want to own real things. And that's a constant, and that continues to this day.
So these guys they're not flush with cash. They're flush with companies, income producing assets, tangible assets, like you said, stuff. And how long do they think, before the tide completely goes out and everybody is buck naked here in this phenomenal game of fake economies?
Well, listen, we began this interview by talking about comments I made in May about the tide going out, and we're going to find out who's wearing bathing suits. Well, I think it's become pretty evident that Deutsche Bank probably isn't wearing a bathing suit. I think it's become pretty evident that there's probably a host of Italian banks that aren't wearing bathing suits. And the real question that I would pose to anybody listening to this interview is, why is it that the American banks all seem to be wearing bathing suits when everybody else, at the beach is buck naked? And I would suggest to you that the real reason for that is that Deutsche Bank, to begin with, they answer to a regulator called BaFin, who is intensely independent, and BaFin raided the offices of Deutsche Bank back about 3 years ago, if my memory serves me correctly. And I mean, I was told by people that were close to German leadership that they were absolutely mortified and horrified with what they discovered that Deutsche Bank was really up to, particularly as it relates to their derivatives book. Well, I'll tell you what, Deutsche Bank in the derivatives world was doing the same stuff that JP Morgan is doing, and that Hong Kong Shanghai Bank does, and that Goldman Sachs does, and that Morgan Stanley does. And I'm going to suggest to you that the real difference is Deutsche Bank has been held to account for their activities, where the Federal Reserve has regulatory purview over JP Morgan's derivatives edifice and other American institutions and their derivatives edifices. And the difference is Deutsche Bank has been held to account for what they're doing, and largely what Deutsche Bank has been engaged in through their derivatives action has been ultimately to prop up the US dollar, because that's what these derivatives books are all about: propping up the US dollar, propping up the US bond market. And of course, the Fed turns the cheek the other way when American institutions do exactly what Deutsche Bank was doing. So what the real difference between Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan is that JP Morgan isn't being held to accounting standards the way Deutsche Bank is being held to accounting standards. That's the real difference. People don't want to talk about that. Nobody on Wall Street wants to talk about that. American regulators certainly don't want to talk about that. But that's because American regulators, their first and primary concern is the perpetuation of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. And this is the sad story. This is going to come to an end. So the tide is going out, and we're starting to notice some naked butts on the beach, and ultimately we're going to find out that everybody on the beach, we're going to really find out, Greg, is that we're really witnessing and looking at a nudist colony, because they're all naked.
You say that
some of them don't have accounting.
Oh, you're saying all the banks, at least in the Western world, all the banks are insolvent, basically.
Pretty much. Listen. Look, whether you might be a bank that isn't engaged in derivatives or not, the banks are all tied to each other through the euro-dollar market, through interbank dealings. They're all tied together. I mean, listen, if you're on a boat that's sinking, and you happen to be one of or two of or three of 800 people, that is wearing a bathing suit and everyone else is naked, you're going down with them.
Just that simple. And what do you think about this fall? Do you think we make it out this year with them being able to play this game where they can prop the markets up and suppress gold and silver and all that? Is there any, I guess if you could see it, it's really not a black swan. Is there anything on the horizon that could, boom, shut the whole thing down and turn it backwards in a heartbeat?
We are, at least my picture, in my view of our financial system, as it sits today, we are in an intensive care unit, and we have a lot of tubes and wires connected to us right now. And the question you're asking me is, how long is somebody who's in critical condition in an intensive care unit going to live? I don't really know the answer to it, other than we could get a code blue any day. We could get a code blue tomorrow. And if you know anything about intensive care units, code blue is when somebody's passed.
You got it, my friend. Rob Kirby, KirbyAnalytics.com. You have your subscription service. You have a lot of one-on-one contact with your subscribers. I think it's $149 a year. Is that correct?
$145 a year, yeah.
$145 a year. As I'll put up the links to your site, KirbyAnalytics.com, also to your sign-up page. Rob Kirby, thanks for coming on USAWatchdog.com and giving us an economic update. We really appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure, Greg.